Welcome you to another episode of In Focus here on NCW Life. I'm your host, Steve Hare. Today our topic is law enforcement with a specific concentration on narcotics crime and drug-related crime with our two sheriffs of Chelan and Douglas County. We have Brian Burnett and Kevin Morris. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve.
I think the big news here that we broke this week was Douglas County's decision to rejoin the Columbia River Drug Task Force, which is an agency which is staffed basically by Chelan, now Douglas, East Wenatchee Police Departments, and the Washington State Patrol. Obviously, it's a very effective investigative tool that you have here in our area for addressing narcotics-related crime. Sheriff Morris, I'll let you take the microphone and explain the importance of having Douglas County involved in that process.
Right. Well, Sheriff Burnett and I, we've been working together now for 5 years, hand in hand when I was the undersheriff. And Sheriff Burnett and Chief Robbins actually came and met with my predecessor, Sheriff Harvey, and I several years back, talking about getting back into the drug task force. Our partnership has just blossomed over the years with Wenatchee, East Wenatchee as well. One thing that I have recognized is that although we have investigators in our office, they are tied up with general crimes. There's just no way that they can effectively do the extensive investigations for narcotics that a task force, a specialized unit, can do. And it's my opinion that we need to partner with our partners and participate in that. And I've said it numerous times. If somebody was arrested in downtown Wenatchee, that is a benefit for Douglas County citizens.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I get the sense that in Douglas County it was more of a budget issue. There's no question that Douglas County agrees that it's an effective organization, that it does its purpose in reducing drug-related crime and getting drugs off the streets. But is it not a budget issue as far as Douglas County is concerned, and that's the reason why they dropped out in the first place?
Certainly. And we have, our general calls for service, and I've been forward about this from the beginning, that we cannot afford to take a deputy off the street, what we have right now, to try to assign them to the task force. That's why I needed a full-time body. And working with our commissioners, they see the same benefits. However, it's a financial situation, right? It's an impact on our overall budget, current expense. We're the largest current expense budget in the county.
Well, it's a commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a commitment. And so how strong a commitment does Douglas County now have to staying on this time?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's long-term for me.
Yeah.
It's not for me, I'm not in it to dip my toe in the waters. But having said that, budgets are budgets.
Yeah.
And so if the commissioners are faced with hard times and they come to me with some cuts, then we will discuss that in the future. But I believe that we're doing okay and we're going to move forward.
It's not just the local revenue stream, but also nationally, I suppose, because you do get some federal funding, correct?
Right. So the Bern JAG Fund has been going on for multiple years, supports regional rural drug task force around the state, Steve. And if you back up, let's do a little history lesson here.
Sure.
2004-ish, our regional drug task force was getting $400,000 plus for operational costs, and that would support administrative assistant that does a lot of the administrative paperwork part, and is a support for the lead agency there, because the lead agency prior to 2004 at the time was Wenatchee Police Department. So they would provide a sergeant and a drug detective, and then the other agencies would all provide one. And then when that funding cut, that's when Douglas County and East Wenatchee made decisions to pull out, and they basically took some resource asset sharing and pulled those resources and left with some of those assets. So fast forward now back to 2011, and at that time, Chelan County, or back in 2004, Chelan County took over as the lead agency. Now we fast forward to 2011, and when we're doing peer reviews, the peer review basically came in and made a recommendation and asked Chief Robbins and I, said, you really should go to East Wenatchee and Douglas County and start that conversation and ask them to come back in. We think it's the right thing to do. It's going to be an effective way. You have more members, you can do more with your investigations.
So how is this going to change the relationship at all? I mean, you're already conducting operations in Douglas County, correct?
Yeah, right. A part of it is just managing it and per policy and procedure and proper protocol when you're talking about undercover investigations, and doing things the safe and the right way for accountability, is to make sure that you have enough people to not just write the search warrant, but when you go to actually initiate the search warrant and do those things in those drug investigations. If you don't have 3 to 4 people involved in that investigation, you just can't do things the way protocol is designed to do.
Sheriff Burnett and Sheriff Morris, how would you describe right now the state of narcotics enforcement right now in Chelan and Douglas County? Start with you, Kevin.
So the opioid epidemic is absolutely real, and my opinion on the opioid epidemic is this: it is a narcotic that you can start off getting legally, and addictions are generated within days sometimes, and then with more restrictions on the opioids, those folks who become addicted then move into other things. Heroin is on an upswing, cocaine, methamphetamines. That's where they start getting into the street level type. So I believe that we are seeing a rise nationally and locally, a rise of these problems with drugs, and I believe a big cause of it, to get to the street level type stuff, is from opioids.
Right, and then along with that, Steve, I mean, if we could say that, back in the day when marijuana had a THC level of 10%, well, that's no longer true anymore. And things that they put, added to other drugs, making methamphetamines or, lacing into cocaine. But when we talk about heroin, and now we have new drugs being introduced into that that are much more lethal, and we're seeing new things, fentanyl, and there's another one new one that we're seeing around the nation that's slowly starting to rise up. That is, hundreds of times more lethal of a dose and a smaller percentage of that amount. And so there's just a lot of factors there that really change the game and how that affects people, both for addiction and/or as far as drug overdose.
As it pertains to the opioid crisis right now, what role do you play in, let's say, monitoring the activities of the medical profession in prescribing these types of medications?
We really don't, Steve. I mean, unless there's information that comes our way that we had somebody, let's say, a medical professional that was doing criminal activity that would lead to an investigation that way. And that itself might have to say, does it fit the protocol of what our Bern JAG money, our grant money, is actually what we're designed to do and investigate street level drugs that lead up to larger dealers and stuff, so we can take major quantities off the street. But having said that, there is an opioid stakeholder group here that probably involves mostly medical professionals that monitor and do that, but law enforcement is integrated into those and involved with those as well.
Okay.
I also believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Fusion Center, there's a bureau that monitors doctors and the prescription, and if they start seeing hits, when we've met with them at our department head meetings, if they start seeing an excessive amount being prescribed to individuals, they start looking into that. And so there is an oversight group that is out there to try to help combat that issue, but it's a lot larger than our local law enforcement entities could even handle.
Okay. To what level are Mexican cartels involved in the trafficking of drugs in our area?
I would say across the board. I mean, obviously, some of them are prescription related, like Sheriff Morris talked about. But again, when you talk about the illegal drugs, methamphetamines, from even marijuana and different marijuana-based type of things, to cocaine and heroin and all of those type of things that we see here on a regular basis, and even some manufactured pills as well, it's a big deal. And it's big business. They're organized. They know what they're doing. They plan ahead for profit loss, that type of thing. They're not banking on just one delivery. They're not banking on one marijuana grow. They're doing multiple things. It's calculated, and they're using technology, and they're pushing drugs where they believe they can make money, and it has to do with laundering money as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
they're actually operating in Chelan and Douglas County?
oh, they're operating all over the world.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They literally have like you said, a business plan. They do have a business model for it's that big of an organization.
How do you track them? How do you track them? I mean, especially in today's world with, Washington State's new sanctuary law, that really kind of ties your hands to a certain extent, doesn't it? In tracking some of these individuals?
The partnerships. The task force works with the DEA. It works with national or federal agencies. You have to, because like the sheriff said, it's nationally. It crosses state lines. And so we do our part in our local area with the task force and work with the national level, and so we help with the eyes and the hands-on locally, but we have to partner, have to work with these folks to make sure that we're getting the complete picture and we're helping them do their job as well.
Yeah, and I think a couple things, Steve, is one is these aren't dumb individuals. They're people that put their time and effort and resources and counter surveillance. They're always trying to be one step ahead of local law enforcement, because that is how they're making their money. And so for them to be investigated and detected and apprehended, or even just having, have to be apprehended, just the, seizure of those drugs and cash really slows down their industry. So they're doing things, what they would say, they're smart, they're intellectual, they're intuitive, and they're figuring out how to, it's always growing in the way that how do they get their drugs, how do they get them here, how do they sell them, how do they move them. At the same time, not everybody involved in drug activity is that smart. When you get to the lower level, and generally the people that are the users don't always make those best decisions. And so we use those people to try to work our way up the chain. Obviously, that doesn't always work, but it does, and it does have an impact. And my point is we can never always take all the drugs off the street, the illegal drugs, but we can never go backwards. And so we always say, we're never going to quit. And I think that's the commitment that our local agencies say, that regardless of what our federal funding is to support this, is that we will keep this task force going, that type of system, so we can keep the quality of life here that we need in North Central Washington.
With the couple of minutes we have left, is there anything you'd like to add before we let you go?
I think for me, it's a big shout out to everybody involved for Douglas County coming back. We saw East Wenatchee Police come back in 2014. It was big. The Washington State Patrol is now no longer in our Columbia River Drug Task Force, just as of 2019. What happens is around the state, they have a lot of different things going on, but with promotions, that one of their detectives got promoted, and they had to look at their allocation of resources, and they decided that they needed to put that staff member somewhere else. And so, and we're not the only task force, local task force around the state that has been impacted that way. But so this is great timing to have Douglas County coming back in, this next year when they get their pieces in place.
Right.
Because we need those extra bodies more than ever now. But again, a good shout out, because I know that Sheriff Morris worked, our communications as undersheriff. We started this conversation a long time ago, and working with, he supported us in going and giving the information to his commissioners, talking to the prosecutor, their judges as well, because their local prosecutor will also be on our executive board along with Sheriff Morris, and so we work as a team. And go over that information. So there's a lot of pieces here that has brought this, and so when I look at this is a great accomplishment, and he is correct when he says the collaboration and the working relationship that we have locally here at law enforcement has really increased in the last couple of years, and I see it growing even more, so and that's important.
Sheriff Morris, would you like to close?
Yeah, you touched.
Last words.
Sure. Yeah, I usually do. You touched on the fiscal aspect of of us re-entering. I think the fiscal aspect is for all of us. The sheriff mentioned that you need 2-3 people to do these types of controlled buys, right? No, I believe none of us could afford that individually. I made that statement to the commissioners that in order for us to do that type of investigation, I'd need 3 people, minimum of 3 people, to be able to conduct that. That's 3 times what we're paying now. And so for one body, we get to join a specialized trained team with all their assets, a 5-person unit, and for the cost of 1. And I think fiscally it is responsible for all of us to work together, join our resources, and attack the same thing that is affecting each and every one of us.
I want to thank both of you for joining me. This was fun. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks,
Okay,
Steve.
and we will be making this a regular feature on In Focus here on NCW Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Hare.